We say we're waiting on God, but if we're honest, a lot of what we call waiting looks a lot like sitting still, not moving, not changing anything, just hoping that something shifts. And then we wonder why, when something finally does open up, we're not ready for it. Welcome to an extra shot of Grace in the Grind. This is where we stay in the conversation a little longer, not more polished, just more honest. So grab your coffee and let's sit in this together. One of the things Scripture is really clear about, but we don't always notice, is that waiting is never passive. It's quiet, it's not flashy, but it's not passive either. When the Bible talks about waiting on the Lord, it's not describing inactivity, it's describing readiness. Jesus says, stay dressed for action and keep your lamps burning. That's not passive language. That's not sit back and relax until I tell you what to do next. That's be ready, be alert, be prepared to move. Noah didn't know what rain was, but he built an ark. Joseph didn't know when or if he would get out of prison, but he kept becoming the kind of man who could handle what God had shown him. David was anointed king and then went back to the field. Not forcing the timeline, just learning faithfulness where he was. They didn't know what God was doing, but they lived in a way that made them ready for when he did move. A lot of us are waiting for clarity, but we're not preparing for movement. We're asking God for direction, but we're structuring our lives like nothing is going to change. We say, God, I'll go wherever you lead, but our schedules are full. Our commitments are locked in. Our finances are stretched thin. So even if God did lead, it would be really hard to follow. And this is something Christy and I have had to wrestle through in a really real way. We've talked a lot about wanting to be debt-free. And yeah, that's financially wise. But that's not the real reason. The deeper reason is this. We don't want to be tied to a certain level of income that we can't follow God if he leads us somewhere unexpected. But here's where it gets real honest. We're not there yet. Not even close. And some days, it feels like we're not getting there. Because at the same time, we're talking about being debt-free, we're also trying to live in obedience in how we've structured our family. Christy's focused on nurturing and teaching our kids, supporting me, sometimes from home, sometimes on the road with me. And that matters to us. We didn't drift into that. We prayed through that. We wrestled through that. And we believe that's what God has asked for us in this season. But let's be real. That decision lowers our potential income. It slows down what we could do financially. And if you look at it purely through human logic, it doesn't fully make sense. But the obvious answer would be, well, if you want to be debt-free, you should both be working. And honestly, we get that. That's not crazy advice. That's not bad logic. But obedience isn't always optimized for efficiency. There are moments where following God and maximizing outcomes don't line up clearly. So we've had to learn to live in that tension, to say we're going to be obedient to what we believe God has called us to. And we're going to steward well what he's given us. But we're also going to trust him with what we can't control. We're doing what we can to move towards being debt-free. We're trying to be wise. We're trying to be disciplined. But we're also really aware this doesn't ultimately sit on us. Because if we try to force outcomes, we'll end up building a life that's harder to step away from later. So instead, we're trying to live in a way that says, God, we trust you with provision. We trust you with timing. We trust you with what this looks like long term. And here's what we've seen. Not perfectly, not easily, but consistently, God provides. Not always the way we would design it. Not always on our timeline for sure. But he has been faithful. And that's what we're building on. Because waiting isn't just about sitting still. It's about aligning your life in a way that you can actually respond to God, even when it costs you something in the short term. And this is where this gets deeper. Because in the New Testament, waiting is always tied to watchfulness. Jesus talks about servants waiting for their masters. Not asleep, not distracted, watching, ready. He says things like, stay awake, be ready, keep your lamps burning, not because we're supposed to figure out the timing, but because we're supposed to live ready to respond, which means the Christian life isn't passive waiting, it's attentive faithfulness. I don't know what you're going to do, and I don't know when you're going to do it. But I don't want to be so distracted, so comfortable, or so locked into my own plans that I miss when you do. Because it's possible to build a life that has no room for interruption. And a lot of the ways God moves feels like interruption at first. Some of us are like, God, I'm open to anything. And God's like, cool, free up your Tuesday night. Lord, I said anything reasonable. And Tuesday night, I've got that show on. Really? I know that sounds funny, but how many of us are so tied to our schedule that we're not willing to give any of those up, or at least not certain ones? Waiting exposes what you actually trust, because when nothing is moving, we can't rely on progress anymore. So what's left? God, or your ability to control outcomes? And most of us bounce between the two. So we travel a lot. With our 4-year-old Fletcher, when we're on the road, he often asks, how much further? Are we there yet? All of those normal questions. And like any good parents, we answer in terms of Bluey. Okay, Fletch, it's a little over an hour. So like 6 or 7 Bluey episodes. That way he kind of understands how far out we are. But it's amazing how many times it's like, Fletcher, we're just a couple minutes from where we're going. And when we arrive to wherever he's so excited about going, we stop the car, we get out, I open Fletcher's doors, and his shoes aren't on, his socks aren't on, his shirt might not even be on, he's got toys piled up, and he's not ready to move. He's sitting there thinking that he wants to be where we're going, but isn't prepared to go do what he wants to do. The adult version for us is asking God, how long is this going to take? So instead of that, try asking, if God opens the door tomorrow, are we ready to walk through it? Not spiritually, practically. Would your life allow it? Or do you have your shoes and socks off, ready to sit back and coast for a few more miles? Would you have to rearrange everything first? Because readiness isn't about having the answers. It's about having a life that can respond. And real quick, if you want to support the show, grab a bag of coffee from Aaron Roots Coffee Company. It keeps these conversations going and keeps me awake long enough to actually finish them. So it's basically ministry on both sides. At some point, the waiting will shift. It always does. God will move, direction will come, opportunity will open. And when it does, the question won't be, did you wait? It will be, were you ready? Waiting is not wasted, but it's also not neutral. It's forming something. The question is, are you being formed on purpose, or are you just sitting still? Stay ready. Stay faithful, and don't waste the waiting.